Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com and the Big Four Accounting Firms YouTube channel. In today's podcast, I wanted to discuss a post that went viral, or somewhat viral, a month ago from somebody that quit the Big Four accounting firms. And usually when somebody quits the Big Four accounting firms and something goes viral, it's usually because they say something terrible about how they hated everybody. But that's not what happened with this guy. His name is Simon Jung, and he worked in Deloitte, Australia. And what he did is he summarized his whole Big Four career, and he was a consultant at Deloitte. And I think it could provide a lot of insight for people wondering what a Big Four accounting firm job is, but more specifically what a Deloitte consultant and what a consultant does in general. And he worked at Deloitte since 2009, and he worked for a total of 11.5 years, according to his resume and this visualization. And his visualization that he posted on LinkedIn said that, I had the amount of time that he worked there, and he left with 77.2% utilization when he worked there. And I'll be discussing more about this later. But when he worked at Deloitte, he said he had 13,700 hours, chargeable hours. He worked on 62 engagements, and he had 34 clients. And he also worked in 3 offices in Melbourne, Australia, Seoul, Korea, and Sydney, Australia. And he also said that he had 12 counselees while he worked at Deloitte. And his LinkedIn resume says that he worked with Power BI, Tableau, and Excel. And those are all softwares. And the only reason I bring it up is because I'm guessing he used Tableau to put together this graphic. And it's a pretty good graphic. It describes his career in a nice little summary. And it looks like the center of the graphic is pretty redundant. It shows the types of projects that he worked on, and it just splits them out in different ways. And I'll go over those projects right now. The majority of his projects were in finance departments, with 62.9% of his projects coming in the finance department. And this makes sense since accounting is often in the finance department. And he also performed a lot of work in strategy, and strategy took up 17.7% of his projects. And the types of engagements he worked on in strategy included M&A, pricing, strategy, and PMI. And the majority of his strategy consulting was related to M&A. So those of you that want to do M&A consulting, you should be focused on strategy at Deloitte. And in his finance consulting, the most common type of engagement he worked on was target operating models and transformation. And this can mean a lot of things. It can mean that people are transforming their finance department. And since accounting is in the finance department, most likely they're doing something in the accounting department, especially if they're hiring the Big Four to do that. And the Big Four will often help their clients implement software like Oracle and other ERPs. And target operating model consulting can be helping clients understand and fix their finance processes. Many companies are stuck in the past, and they want to change their finance departments, and these consulting engagements are what help them do that. And this work usually isn't voluntary. They have to change their finance department after a restatement or a really big finance issue. However, this type of work will be put on the back burner now during the COVID epidemic and during these lean times that we're in now, especially in Australia. The Australians have some difficult times in the Big Four accounting firms. So a lot of this work, which was a big component of Simon's career, is probably going by the wayside. He probably saw the writing on the wall and saw that layoffs were coming, so he just wanted to get out of there. And other engagements he worked on while working on finance projects include shared service work, business intelligence and management reporting, cost management, and business partnering, and lastly, he had another category on there. And some of these things that are most likely to still continue are work like shared services and cost cutting, because shared services is basically just outsourcing, and companies will be trying to outsource now to save money. And they're also going to need to cut costs to stay in business. So they're still going to be doing that type of consulting. But these target operating models and business transformations is just not going to happen. And he also did operations consulting, which took up 11.3% of his projects. And in operations consulting, he worked on process excellence, supply chain, and PMO. And there might be some supply chain work going on right now just because people want to reduce their exposure to countries like China, where this pandemic started from. And there's just a lot of controversy in that area right now. So people might want to make their supply chain a little bit more reliable and a little bit stronger. And lastly, he had a few projects in technology and robotics, but those were his two smallest categories of projects that he worked on while at Deloitte. Another thing that stood out to me was his utilization and chargeable hours. I'm not sure how Australia works, but his hours worked, or his chargeable hours, seemed pretty low. I'm not sure how he got to 77% utilization with only 13,000 chargeable hours worked over his career. If you work in the Big Four over 11.5 years, you better expect to work more than this guy did, especially in the future. With the way things are working, they're going to expect people to work a lot more hours, especially after they lay people off. People are going to have to pick up the slack. And most Big Four have over 2,000 hours that you need to work in a year. And of those 2,000 hours, you need to oftentimes be over 80% utilization. So if you do that over a 10-year career, you can easily get to 15,000, 16,000 hours. So I'm not really sure about the 13,000 hours here. That seems pretty low. Maybe just Australia has different metrics. And it seems to me like this guy might have had it pretty easy. But this could also be due to maybe he spent a lot of time traveling between clients. But those hours seem pretty low to me. So the utilization seems about right, because as you get further on in your career, utilization is going to come under 80%. But early on in your career, it should be well over 80%. And he said he had 12 counselees, and this also makes sense to me. 12 might seem like a lot, but it isn't really that much over an 11.5-year career. You have to remember that employees come and go, so you will oftentimes have counselees that you only have for a couple of months or less before they leave the firm. But also, as you go up in the firms make you have more counselees. So 12 doesn't seem like a lot. 12 doesn't seem like a lot to me. It seems just about right. So in summary, you can use this graphic to learn each area of Deloitte's consulting business and which one you would like to work in the most. Best practice consulting is going to be the one that is the hardest hit right now, this target operating model. So just be aware of that. And you can also use this graphic to learn about how Tableau can change your career. This obviously helped boost his profile and his career. However, most people aren't going to consider him an all-star because most consultants have to be familiar with Tableau and Power BI today. You can't not know this stuff if you're going to be in consulting. So even though he got this to be viral, most consultants are going to be aware of this software. And you just have to be creative with the way you use it to stand out. So you should just get familiar with it right now. And I think things like this will become commonplace in the workplace in the future. Like, I think a lot of people that are going to quit are going to do something similar to this guy. A lot of people are going to copycat him. A lot of people that are trying to get a Big Four job are going to copycat this. They're going to summarize the work they did in college and early on in their lives in this kind of format. And in the future, many Big Four will probably have you put your resume or application in this type of format as like an entrance requirement. They will want to see your background in a Tableau format. And I spent a previous podcast speaking about how Tableau was one of the 3 most important technologies that accountants should learn. So if you listen to this podcast, you already knew about Tableau, you knew about its importance and how it's the future of the Big Four accounting firms. So make sure to go check that out. And I'll include links to important stuff in the show notes to this, so make sure to check that out. And that's today's update. Stay up to date on all the Big Four accounting firms, news and information, and career advice. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening.